I never thought taking a back road would lead to the craziest night of my life. It was supposed to be a quick drive home from Mike's party. I'd been on this road before, but never at night and never alone. The moon barely lit up the old, cracked asphalt, and my headlights weren't much help either. It was just me and the endless stretch of nothing. As I drove, my car suddenly sputtered. No, don't do this to me now, I muttered, slamming my foot on the gas. The engine groaned before it completely died. I pulled over to the side of the road. Great. No signal, no car charger, and miles away from anyone. My phone was dead, and it felt like the entire world had gone quiet. The wind had stopped, no crickets, no nothing. It was just too quiet. I sat there for what felt like forever, hoping some random car might pass by, but of course nothing. After about 30 minutes of waiting, I decided to get out and take a look under the hood, even though I had no idea what I was doing. That's when I saw headlights coming down the road. My heart leaped a bit, and I waved my arms like a madman. The car slowed down, and a beat-up truck rolled to a stop next to me. The driver leaned out. Car trouble? His voice was gravelly, the kind that makes your skin crawl, but I was desperate. Yeah, it just died on me. No idea what happened, I replied, trying to sound casual. He got out and walked over, flashlight in hand. The guy looked like he hadn't showered in weeks. Greasy hair, clothes covered in dirt. Let me take a look, he grunted. I watched him fumble around under the hood for a bit, but something felt off. His movements were too slow, almost like he was stalling. And why wasn't he saying anything about what was wrong with the car? The longer he took, the more uneasy I felt. Looks like your alternator's shot, he finally said, wiping his hands on his jeans. No way you're getting anywhere tonight. Great, I muttered. You know if there's a gas station nearby? He shook his head, staring at me a little too long before speaking again. I could give you a lift. Nearest town's about 20 minutes that way. Everything in me screamed not to get in that truck, but what choice did I have? My phone was dead, no other cars in sight, and I wasn't about to spend the night in the middle of nowhere. I forced a smile. Yeah, okay. Thanks, man. The truck was a mess, reeking of stale fast food, and something else I couldn't quite place. Something foul like damp clothes that had been sitting in a corner for too long. I tried to breathe shallowly through my nose, but it wasn't helping much. The guy didn't say anything after we started driving, just stared straight ahead, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him together. The road seemed to stretch forever in front of us, lined by nothing but trees, their branches swaying in the cold wind. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Every once in a while, I'd catch him glancing at me from the corner of his eye, quick, darting looks that made my skin crawl. I wasn't sure if he was checking on me or if he was thinking about something worse. Trying to break the silence, I cleared my throat. So, you from around here? He didn't respond right away. Just when I thought he was going to ignore me, he finally muttered, nah, just passing through. His voice had this odd quality to it, flat, like he was tired or bored, or maybe like he just didn't care. It made the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I forced a smile, even though he probably couldn't see it in the dark. Right? Same here, I said, hoping to keep things light. I was at a friend's party a little ways back. Didn't think I'd end up stranded like this, though. He didn't react, just kept driving. I watched the trees whip by outside, trying to remember where we were on the map, but nothing looked familiar. The road twisted and turned in ways I hadn't noticed earlier. The more we drove, the more it felt like we were going deeper into the woods, not toward any town. So, how much longer to the gas station? I asked, keeping my voice casual, even though panic was starting to gnaw at me. He didn't answer right away. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel, and I saw his jaw clench before he finally said, not much further. That didn't sit right with me. The uneasy feeling in my gut was growing. Why was he being so vague? Something wasn't adding up. I leaned forward slightly, trying to get a better look out the window, but all I could see were trees and more trees. No lights, no signs, just darkness swallowing everything up. I took a deep breath, trying to think of a way out of this. My mind raced through the options. I could jump out of the truck, but we were still moving pretty fast. What if he didn't slow down? What if I got hurt? There was no guarantee anyone else would be coming down this road tonight. I had to keep calm. You sure we're going the right way? I asked, trying not to let the fear seep into my voice. He didn't look at me. Yeah, don't worry about it. That was it, the way he said it. That weird, flat tone again, but this time it felt like a warning. My heart started to race, and I knew I couldn't just sit there any longer. My fingers twitched, and I slowly glanced at the door handle. If things went south, I needed to be ready. My breathing got heavier, but I tried to keep it quiet. I couldn't let him see I was nervous. The truck suddenly slowed down, and I saw the road ahead split into a fork. The headlights barely illuminated the two options. One road led further into the forest, and the other back toward civilization. At least, that's what I hoped. I had to act now. Without thinking, I made a decision. My hand shot out, grabbing the door handle and yanking it open. The cold night air rushed in, hitting my face like a slap. Before I could second-guess myself, I jumped. My body hit the ground hard, and I rolled across the dirt and rocks, feeling the sting of cuts on my arms and knees. The impact knocked the wind out of me, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. But I didn't have time to think about the pain. I scrambled to my feet, adrenaline surging through my veins, and took off running toward the trees. Behind me, I heard the truck's tires screech as it came to a stop. The driver shouted something, but I didn't stop to listen. I could hear his footsteps pounding after me, twigs snapping under his boots as he crashed through the brush. My heart was pounding in my chest, but I pushed myself to go faster, weaving through the trees, branches scratching at my face and arms. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my legs felt like they were going to give out, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. I didn't know how far ahead I was or if he was gaining on me, but I wasn't about to turn around and find out. Just when I thought I couldn't go any further, I saw something through the trees. An old cabin, half hidden by the thick woods, its windows dark and broken. It looked abandoned, but it was my only hope. I sprinted toward it, practically throwing myself against the door as I yanked it open and stumbled inside. Slamming the door shut behind me, I pressed my back against it, trying to catch my breath. My heart was still racing, the fear coursing through me like electricity. Outside, I could still hear him moving, his heavy footsteps circling the cabin. For now, I was trapped. I stood there, pressed against the cabin door, struggling to catch my breath. My heart was hammering so hard in my chest that I could feel it in my throat. Outside, everything had gone eerily quiet. Too quiet. The only sound was my shaky breathing and the faint rustle of leaves in the wind. I tried to listen for him, for any sign that he was still out there, but there was nothing, just a thick, oppressive silence. For a second, I thought maybe he had given up, driven away. But no, guys like him don't just give up. The cabin was small and smelled of damp wood and mold. It looked like no one had set foot in there for years. Dust clung to everything. The few pieces of broken furniture, the warped wooden floorboards, the grimy windows. My eyes darted around, looking for anything I could use to defend myself if he found a way in. But there was nothing. No heavy objects, no tools, just a place forgotten by time. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and tried to calm down. I had to think. I had to figure out what to do next. My body ached from the fall, and my scraped hands throbbed, but the adrenaline was still pumping through me, keeping me alert. I moved quietly, stepping away from the door and toward the window to take a look outside. The glass was dirty, but I could just make out the shapes of the trees, the shadows shifting in the pale moonlight. Nothing moved, but that didn't mean he wasn't there, hiding in the darkness, waiting for me to make a mistake. Just then I heard a sound. A branch snapped, somewhere off to the side of the cabin. My stomach clenched, and I ducked down, crouching beneath the window. I didn't dare look again. He was out there. He was close. "Come out!" His voice pierced the silence, loud and commanding, sending a jolt of fear through me. "I know you're in there." I squeezed my eyes shut, hoping, praying that he wouldn't find a way in. I couldn't face him again. Not now, not like this. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have anything to protect myself with. There was a thud against the door. My heart leaped into my throat. He was trying to get in. I bit down hard on my lip to keep from making any noise, my hands trembling as I pressed them against the floor. The door shook again, and I heard the handle rattle. Was it locked? I hadn't even checked when I slammed it shut. "You're only making this harder on yourself." His voice was louder now, and I could hear his footsteps circling the cabin. He was trying to figure out another way inside. I had no doubt that if he wanted to, he could break the door down or bust through one of the windows. My mind raced. I had to move. I couldn't just sit there and wait for him to break in. I looked around the cabin again, desperate for anything that could help. In the corner of the room, I spotted a back door. It was smaller and looked like it hadn't been opened in years, but it might be my only shot. Crouching low, I moved as quickly and as quietly as I could toward it, hoping he wouldn't hear me over his own movements outside. Every creak of the floorboards felt like it echoed through the entire cabin, but I kept going. I reached the door, my hand trembling as I grabbed the rusty handle. It wouldn't budge. No, I whispered under my breath, twisting the handle harder. It still wouldn't move. My heart was pounding in my ears, and I was sure he would hear me. I yanked on it again, putting my whole weight into it this time, and with a loud, grating sound, the door finally gave way, opening just enough for me to squeeze through. I froze for a moment, terrified that the noise had given me away. I held my breath, listening. He was still out front, muttering something under his breath. He hadn't heard me yet. I slipped through the door, closing it as quietly as I could behind me, and found myself outside in the back of the cabin. The woods were dense, the shadows long and dark, but I had no time to be afraid of what might be lurking in them. I had to get as far away from here as possible, and fast. I started running again, my legs screaming in protest as I pushed through the thick underbrush. My scraped knees burned with every step, and the branches tore at my clothes, but I didn't care. I just had to keep going. The trees closed in around me, and the darkness was suffocating, but I couldn't stop. Not yet. Behind me, I heard a door slam open, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps crashing through the woods. He was chasing me. "Get back here," he shouted, his voice filled with rage. My chest tightened with fear, but I forced myself to move faster, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My mind raced, trying to figure out where I could go. If I could just get far enough, maybe he'd give up, maybe I could lose him in the thick woods. But then, just ahead, I saw it a road. I nearly cried with relief when I realized it was the same road I'd been on before, the one where my car had broken down. It wasn't much, but it was something. I ran toward it, my legs barely holding up beneath me as I broke through the trees and stumbled onto the pavement. There were no cars. The road stretched out, empty and silent, but at least I wasn't in the woods anymore. I had to keep going. If I could follow the road long enough, maybe I'd find help. But before I could take another step, I heard the sound of an engine roaring to life behind me. I turned, my heart dropping into my stomach. The truck. He was driving it toward me, the headlights blinding as they cut through the darkness. I had nowhere to run. The roar of the engine echoed in the night, the headlights of the truck casting long, eerie shadows over the trees. My mind was screaming at me to run, but my body felt paralyzed. The headlights bore down on me like a spotlight, the truck speeding up as it barreled toward me. I snapped out of it just in time and leaped to the side, tumbling down into a ditch by the side of the road. My body hit the hard ground with a painful thud, but I scrambled to my feet, my heart pounding so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear anything else. The truck screeched to a halt a few feet ahead, tires kicking up gravel. I could see the silhouette of the driver through the windshield, his figure looming like a dark shape in the driver's seat. He threw the truck into reverse, the engine growling as he backed up toward me. There was no time to think. I had to run again, even though I didn't know where I could go. The road stretched endlessly, and the woods were nothing but a dark maze. I darted back into the trees, feeling the branches scratch and tear at my skin as I pushed through. I was running on pure adrenaline now, my body burning from exhaustion, my lungs on fire. My mind raced. There had to be a way out of this. He couldn't chase me forever. Maybe I could lose him in the thick woods. Maybe I'd find another cabin or some sign of help. But none of those thoughts stopped the fear that was flooding through me. It felt like there was no way out, no way to escape. Behind me, I heard the truck doors slam shut and heavy footsteps again. He wasn't giving up. He was hunting me. I stumbled over a root, nearly falling flat on my face, but I caught myself just in time. My vision blurred with tears of frustration and fear. I couldn't stop moving. I had to keep going. The woods were endless, but so was the danger. His footsteps seemed to grow louder, closer, as I pushed deeper into the forest. Suddenly, I broke through the trees and found myself in another clearing. The moonlight illuminated something ahead, something metallic and worn down by time. It was another car, an old one, half buried by the forest. My heart raced as I rushed toward it, hoping against hope that maybe, just maybe, it still worked. I yanked open the door, wincing as the rusted hinges groaned loudly. Inside, the seats were torn, and the dashboard was covered in a thick layer of dust, but I didn't care. My hands fumbled with the ignition, but there were no keys. Come on, come on, I muttered, panic rising in my throat. I checked the glove box, the floor, anywhere a key might be hidden, but there was nothing. The air felt thick and suffocating, and every second I wasted in that car felt like it was sealing my fate. I heard the footsteps again, closer now. He was almost here. There was no time to search anymore. I needed to hide. I crawled into the back seat, pulling myself as low as I could, trying to make myself invisible. My breath was shaky, and I could barely contain the panic threatening to explode out of me. From my hiding spot, I saw him enter the clearing, his figure illuminated by the pale light of the moon. He stopped, scanning the area, his eyes narrowing as he looked around. He was close enough that I could see the way his chest heaved with each breath, the way his eyes darted around like he was searching for something or someone. Me! I held my breath, pressing myself flat against the seat. He hadn't seen me yet. Maybe I could stay hidden. Maybe he'd think I kept running and leave. But then, he walked toward the car. I felt my heart stop as I heard his boots crunching on the gravel just outside the door. He circled the car, his heavy breathing the only sound in the night. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying he wouldn't open the door. But of course he did. The door creaked open, and I felt the cold night air rush in. For a moment, everything was still. He didn't move. I didn't move. It was as if the entire world had frozen in place, waiting for the next terrible thing to happen. Then I heard a voice, one that wasn't his. "Drop the knife, Jimmy." I jolted at the sound. Another man stood at the edge of the clearing, holding a flashlight in one hand, a gun in the other. His voice was calm but firm, like he'd done this before. Jimmy, the man who'd been chasing me, turned slowly, lowering his hand. In the pale light, I saw the glint of a blade in his grip. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Didn't think you'd show up, Sheriff," Jimmy said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. The sheriff didn't flinch. "I've been looking for you, Jimmy. For a long time, I felt the world spin. The sheriff had been looking for him. This wasn't some random guy offering me a ride. He was dangerous. Maybe worse than I could have ever imagined." Jimmy chuckled softly, stepping back from the car. "You always were a little too late, weren't you?" His voice was calm now, almost mocking, like this was some kind of game to him. "And now you've dragged her into it." The sheriff's eyes flicked to me for a second, and he nodded, just enough to let me know it was going to be okay. "Step away from her, Jimmy. You're done." Jimmy's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, I thought he was going to lunge at the sheriff. My whole body tensed, waiting for the worst. But instead, Jimmy let out a sigh and dropped the knife into the dirt. "Guess you win this round," he muttered. The sheriff stepped forward, his gun trained on Jimmy as he moved in to cuff him. My entire body sagged with relief, the tension flooding out of me all at once. I stayed crouched in the back seat, too scared to move, too scared to believe it was really over. As the sheriff led Jimmy toward the road, he glanced back at me. "You're safe now," he said quietly. "It's over." I wasn't sure if I believed him yet, but for the first time all night, I felt like I could breathe again.